In anticipation for the new season, I expect a lot of returning players are going to be returning to the game. And I feel like over the last 3 or 4 seasons now, the player base who was here in early playtest were able to learn a lot from the game by trial and error and hanging out in the official Discord that the newer players have not really been able to get a hold of or grasp. I've had many DMs asking for coaching and stuff like that. And while I'm still probably going to try to help those people in any way I can, I'm really trying to give like a broad overview in this video for how the game actually functions and what your character does. Um, and just like if any of that sounds interesting, make sure you pay attention, and I will try to help you get better at the game, even at a macro level rather than like a individual success level. So let's get ooh. So let's get into the whole of the game. So like we'll go over what you're going to learn. Basically, you're going to learn how to farm gold in stages, like stages of the wipe, what the best way to farm gold is, based on your particular playstyle, how to gear up properly, and useful stat knowledge. There's a lot of people that don't understand how stats work in general, how stats work in the game at an individual level, what stats are fake, placebo stats, stuff like that. Just like all the stuff about stats I can fit in at a broad level, so you can just kind of like dig in if you need to dig in for yourself. Understand your role in a team slash what you're doing when you're playing solo, how to play the map at a broad level. Like I'm not gonna go over individual tiles or anything like that, or like everyone knows, ooh, high ground good, but you know what I mean. And then how to PvP, sort of. Like I'm not gonna get into a huge PvP guide because like obviously I play basically one class. I play barbarian. It plays different than all the other classes, but there's useful things to know when you're playing solo versus trio versus duo, and versus what maps you're playing on, sort of, because certain maps definitely function way differently than other maps, and there's like a couple like useful informational concepts that you could hear and might help you unlock like how you think about what you're doing when you're playing said map. All right, for all the super new people, pause this video and read this. This is like all the terms for the most part. So if I like say something by accident, like MR or PDR or something like that, without actually saying it all the way, I'll try to do my best to say it all the way. These are just what they mean. Stuff like that. The only term that matters for me in particular is the term that I made, which is League of Legends character, which just refers to all the characters in the game that have some sort of bullshit or some sort of like wildly strong mechanic that just changes how the game is played against them, or how they play the game in like such a drastic manner that they can't even be considered a real character, like druid, sorcerer, somewhat rogue, kind of ranger, wizard, stuff like this, right? These characters are like League of Legends characters. They just do way too much and have way too much freedom. Yeah, and then that's the objective of the presentation: get you better at PvP, get you getting at least more kills, faming your little group of friends, increase your knowledge so that you can impart it on other people, and get your money up in the game without gambling or being like a fucking degenerate. Okay, so these are what the stats give you, like the base stats. That's what they give you, just so you understand some of the core concepts of like the reason why they nerfed Magic Power Bonus. Magic Power Bonus was nerfed indirectly, well, directly, but not via Will, because literally Will gave you way too many stats. Will gives you Magic Power Bonus, which are two different things. Even though they correlate to the same number at the end, you can get bonuses from just Magic Power rolls, or you can get bonuses from like percent Magic Power rolls, which determine how far your cap goes at the end, which we'll get to later. It gave you debuff duration, which is huge. A lot of people sleep on debuff duration, but it's really good for ignoring weapon slows and other slows in general. And gave you magical interaction speed, which isn't that big of a deal, but it does help in like the regular dungeon when it comes to interacting with shrines and resing your teammates. That's why it got nerfed. That shit was way too good on classes that already have an advantage inherently by being ranged, for the most part. Now we're going to talk about kind of like specifically how stats work, it's important that you probably go and like read the wiki because none of this is displayed in game, obviously. But I'm just going to highlight some stuff here so that you understand what to look for on your specific character for what you're doing. Most stats are hybrid stats, meaning like if you want to get action speed is comprised of agility and dexterity by 0.75 values for dex and 0.25 for agility. So like whenever you're trying to get a specific stat in the game that isn't a base stat, most of the time it is comprised of two different stats to achieve said stat. The most important thing that you guys need to understand and you need to look out for is this. When you come onto the wiki page, you're going to be confronted with this page, any stats like this. The most important thing for building kits is knowing when to stop investing in certain stats and when you need to sacrifice things to get more of said stat. When you reach 25 dexterity, which is the minimum like threshold cutoff, right? Like anything from 0 to 13, they're trying to get you to be able to play the game, okay? It basically makes you not swing your weapon in the negative, okay? Once you get past 25, till 41, all your stats for dexterity are basically giving you 1.5 action speed, which is an insane number and very important to understand. There's a lot of people that will like bump themselves in on their kit to 26, 27 dex. So you're only getting like 3 points of value or 2 points of value at the increased level for the like the increased bump from getting over 25, where it would be more beneficial for you to sacrifice some of your other rolls for more dex so that you can increase and get the most out of this extra value. And then once you're over 41, it's not much of a big deal unless you're going for a specific weird build. Okay? Some stats can only be attained via gear, meaning what I mean by this is like your manual equip speed, which is how fast you equip your weapons, can only be attained by getting dexterity. It can't be rolled. You can't get a specific roll to increase your equip speed yet. They may change in the next patch. I doubt it. The devs aren't that interested in making unique stats like that. But it's very important to know that if you're playing like someone like Barb, who needs a lot of action speed to even swing the weapon, what's more important is that you need to be able to switch to your weapon, which is the biggest like drawback for playing any sort of melee class, is being able to switch your weapon and go from unarmed while chasing to armed so you can hit your opponent. And that can only be gained by getting flat dexterity. Dexterity is the only thing that moves that bar. Then there's things that I determined that are like real stats versus fake stats. And like, what I mean by that is like movement speed is kind of like a fake stat to a certain point. You only need a certain amount of movement speed on a handful of characters. And then it becomes like a placebo fake stat where like getting any more move speed or any more X stat is like fake. It's not real because it doesn't do anything. For instance, if you have any magic resistance versus any of the high-end gear classes, like if they have actual kits on, like you're playing like a full 225 plus game or whatever, and you have anything under 55 magic resistance, it's fake. It doesn't do anything because all the damage comes from true. It's fake. Don't worry about it. Don't get more of it. It's fake. Completely fake. It's the same thing for certain levels of PDR, which gets into the next point, which is like stat thresholds have like, it's kind of like placebo, but like there's certain thresholds of stats that matter, that seem to matter. Personal experience, placebo plus placebo from, or anecdotal experience for myself and anecdotal experience from talking to people. And that's if you have like 50% PDR or 60% PDR, anything in between those is basically useless. Anything above 50 feels good. Like as soon as you hit 50, it feels good. But if you don't hit 60, you're not going to feel any difference between 50 and 60. So that works for PDR. Action speed is the same thing. Like anything below 20 will feel bad unless you're using specific weapons that work better with low action speed. Anything below 20 will feel bad. Anything between 30 to 30, anything below 20 will feel bad. Anything from 20 to 40 will feel like nothing really changed for you. Anything above 40 will feel like really good. And then 50, there's like a nirvana breakpoint for certain weapons like the Warmaul, where once you're at 50, it feels like you're chaining, as long as you don't get interrupted or clank a wall or anything like that. you will reach a nirvana point where hitting super fast with the Warmaul will allow you to keep people in the slow range and keep people at bay that are trying to hit you really quickly. So that's a big thing. You have to talk to people in your class because I don't know all the Nirvana points for or the thresholds for other classes other than Barb. All I know is that in general, movement speed 300. Once you're over 300 for melee classes, it doesn't feel that much better unless you're playing probably Rogue. Anything below that will feel really terrible. Action speed, like I said, 20% to 40%. It'll feel basically the same as long as you're above 20 for most classes. It'll feel fine. Once you're above 40 for like two-hander, big chunker weapon users, it will feel really good. And then like 50, there's a Nirvana breakpoint for just specifically the Warmaul because of its movement speed's low. Stuff like that for PDR is the same. As long as you're above 20, you won't feel like you're immediately dying. If you're 20 to 40, you won't feel hardly any different. Once you're above 40, once you're above 40, you'll feel a little bit tanky. But 40 to 50, you won't feel any difference until you hit 50. Same thing from 50 to 60. And 60 to 65, I feel basically no difference. I'm sure fighters will feel a difference once they hit 70, but like that's like not always the case, and you won't always reach that. But it's just important to note that you should always be checking the wiki for this because like if you get over 50 dex, you're basically getting nothing. The next thing, certain classes are semi-hard locked to certain pieces. So I'll bring something up on screen just so you understand. But like the barbarian class in particular is hard locked to dexterity/agility on their chest and on their pants and on their helmet. What does this mean? I'm going to use the barb as an example, but you can use any class because I'm sure other classes suffer from the same problem. If you are hard locked to agi, dex, and on your helmet, chest, and pants, because you're basically only ever using loose trousers, cloth pants, or brave hunters, your chest piece without trolling is basically always ruby silver doublet, tri-pelt doublet, tri-pelt northern full tunic, and northern full tunic. You're basically locked to those same group of stats. And your helmet without trolling is you're hard locked to the visored sallet, the Barbuda helm. That's basically the only helmets that you can use that are basically viable for different reasons. But you'll notice that I'm hard locked into those 3 slots to the same group of stats. So that would mean that if I wanted to get any other stats that are relevant to my character, like HP and PDR and some other stuff, I have to be very selectful of what I choose for my other pieces of gear. So, for instance, my gloves are almost always going to have to give me HP. My cape is almost always going to have to give me HP. My boots are almost always going to have to give me movement speed and some form of HP. Same with my rings, etc., etc. Obviously, you can offset some of that stuff because all stats are still on rings, but it's very important to note. The next thing that's the most slept on stat in the entire game is damage reduction in terms of flat damage reduction to the head via helmets. You'll notice this season, in particular, a lot of people have dropped off using the Shadow Mask because the Shadow Mask provides a bunch of stats, which is really nice, but it offers 0% headshot reduction. You'll notice that most people have stopped using the Shadow Mask. The headshot reduction is super important, especially for classes and versus weapons that do a lot of extra damage. For instance, if you have like 13% damage reduction on a Rondel, it does nothing. 13% headshot reduction against like a fucking short sword, again, it does nothing. Even so much as like an arming sword, it does nothing. But if you have headshot reduction versus big hard-hitting weapons like the Warmaul, the Bardiche, the Halberd, stuff like that, headshot reduction is insane value. If you are choosing helmets that have low headshot reduction, and you can choose helmets that have higher headshot reduction, which is why the visored sallet is like the best helmet on the barb that you can buy, you need to be taking this. This is why Houndskull has always been prolific on fighters and stuff like that in comparison to the other stuff. A lot of the interesting things on particularly plate gear, which is why I hope they change it in the future, is projectile reduction. Projectile reduction is a huge stat that you can get on any sort of plate piece, which is why it's like, and feels impossible to kill certain classes when you're using projectiles, like fighter. for instance, if you're playing Ranger, but it doesn't really matter because of True. But this is going to be coming into like a huge play if they increase this, which I assume they are going to increase some of this stuff in the next few seasons based on gear, because they're giving the MR gear some stats. I assume they're going to tweak some stuff and give projectile damage reduction to other stuff. It's very important to know what things are not projectiles and which are projectiles. You can find videos on that if you need to look that up. But like, yeah, basically anything that's flying that's not hit scan is a projectile. So it's very useful. MR and gear, again, useful, but like never go for MR gear. Even though they added the stats to it, it's still placebo because, like I said before, magic resist on gear doesn't do anything to you unless you're at like 50%. You'll never really notice it. Like all the damage is true. You're still getting ranged. It will never matter. I will say though, for fighters, it's a little bit different because they're wearing full plate, and plate sometimes provides negative magic resistance, which is why gold gear is the most important gear on fighter, because it doesn't give you the base negative magic res. If you're in the negative, yeah, get magic resist on your gear just so you're not a negative. But as soon as you're above like 10%, nothing will feel any different. It won't matter. AR and gear, very important. Never roll armor rating on your gear ever if it is not a like 10 roll on like a chest or a pants. Always roll percent PDR. Because of the curves, you will always get better out of it. There may be a weird use case on fighter where rolling armor is better because of how the curve works and how defense master works, but always roll percent damage reduction whenever you can get percent damage reduction if you're rolling damage reduction. I see it all the time. People griefing stats, griefing their gear with gems by rolling armor rating. Never roll armor rating ever. This also goes for rolling fizz power. When you can roll one fizz power is not worth more than the base 2.5% that you can roll from getting physical damage bonus. And physical damage bonus will always be better. And any bonus will always be better on average, except for like max health bonus in a weird situation there, because it ignores caps. Anything that goes to percent ignores caps, usually is applied afterwards, so it doesn't affect the flat number cap that you're ever going for. So never roll fizz power, never gamble on like max health on rings and stuff like that. It's always better to get percent for the most part. You can gamble if you feel like wasting gear, but like that's just, stuff like that. Never, ever, ever, ever roll one fizz power on gear. Please, for the love of God, stop. Stop rolling armor rating on gear too. Always PDR, always, 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 always. Okay, there's like a million different things to talk about here, but for a lot of the new players, they don't understand a bunch of stuff. Okay, so your weapon has an idle move speed penalty. That is the number shown on your weapon. It says minus 30. Okay, when you have a minus 30 weapon, you're not actually just minus 30 the whole time you have that weapon or shield equipped. You are minus 30 plus, it's a negative multiplier of usually like 0.85 when you're swinging the weapon. So you're way slower when you're swinging. So this compounds on like really heavy weapons to make them even worse. That's why it feels like you can never catch anybody when you're playing a two-handed weapon, especially ones that are slow like the Wormhole. Keep that in mind. Different moves have different move speed penalties. So usually the first swing of a combo is less, like a higher move speed penalty. You'll be moving less than the second swing, and then the third swing usually comes back and is back to the bigger slow. So the game is trying to allow you to chain things, but it doesn't always work like that. Each weapon has its own individual sour spot. This is why certain weapons like the halberd are unusable. Please, before you play the game, if you want to get good or try to use a specific weapon for a specific build, make sure that you look up the sour spot on the wiki. It should be in the game, I know, but it's not. And make sure you're trying to hit people with the said sour spot zone. So like if you want to do 100% of your damage on the arming sword, you need to be hitting them with the top half of the blade. Otherwise, you're going to be doing way less damage. And you'll basically feel like your weapon isn't doing damage, even though you should be doing damage. This is why daggers are the meta weapon of choice for the most part, because they don't have sour spots, and they're basically forcing you as the other weapon user to sour spot. It's the same reason why range is overpowered, because there's no sour spots on arrows. It's the same reason why magic is overpowered in general. Again, we're gonna get people raging, but like because it doesn't have sour spots. There's different hit location modifiers, which is compounded by Cyrus bots, which is why the halberd is basically unusable, because most of the weapon, if they get too close, is doing 50% damage in a red zone, and the weapon is comprised of small green zone and giant red zone. And then on top of that, you're getting bad limb locations. So you're doing 70% of the original weapon damage. Let's say it's 100, now you're doing 70 damage, and then you're hitting a limb, which has 25% damage. It's not, but let's just say it was. Then you're doing even less damage, closer to like 25 damage, right? Different weapons have different impact power. This is only important if you're trying to attack shields, and you're trying to break boxes. That's why you can't break boxes quickly with certain weapons. Certain weapons have bigger ones, like all two-handers have basically base 5%, 5 impact power, or sorry, 4 impact power, which is enough to break boxes. Some have 3, and impact power only matters if you're fighting shields. Certain shields have impact resistance, meaning once you have the same impact resistance as someone's shield, or you have the same impact power as someone's impact resistance, when you hit their shield, they will stagger a little bit. It is not a full stagger like as if you had more impact power than the impact resistance. These are two different forms of stagger. There's a light stagger, which just prevents you from immediately attacking, which is why desync blocking, a bug in the game, is so prevalent right now for fighting classes like Warmaul or Bear. And then there's, they're not classes, sorry, classes like Druid with Bear and weapons like Warmaul. And then there's the full stagger, which is why barbs use Crush in general. When you hit a shield, it will full stagger you, preventing you from blocking or attacking and leave you a little bit staggered, which is way worse than the regular stagger. Different combos have different damage. So when you're doing multiple attacks from a weapon, it initiates combos. Combos do different damage. Usually from most weapons, it is increased. It was nerfed for the second attack of Bardiche, but it's also good to know that like certain weapons, their third attack isn't as valuable. So it's better to cycle attack 1, attack 2 than it is to fully complete a combo. This is particularly, or it could have a worse pattern like the arming sword, where people are usually doing 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, and not engaging with the third combo. This is important for things like this Zweihander, stuff like that. Like this Zweihander third attack does a lot of damage, but it takes a long time. So, and it's a poke. So you might want to just go 1-2, 1-2. Same thing with the Bardiche. The Bardiche third attack is shorter ranged. So usually people are just A1, A2 cycling, and dropping certain combo damages is useful to know, in particular because sometimes going for the third swing might not do, if it doesn't kill the person, it'd be better for you to do a 1-2 instead of a 1-2-3. Infinite swing patterns versus non-infinite swing patterns just refers to certain weapons that have infinite swing combos. There's only a handful in the game, which is Rondel Dagger, the Warmaul, and the Halberd. I think are the only true infinite swing patterns. I think the Rapier counts, but it's not really an infinite swing pattern per se. It just has such low reset time that it doesn't matter. But it's important to know these things because if someone's swinging a Warmaul, they never have to technically stop swinging the Warmaul. So it's better to punish them once they stop, as with every weapon, but Warmaul specifically. Same with like Rondel Dagger. Rondel Dagger, they never have to stop swinging, and whatnot. But there is certain two-handed weapons that allow you to perform infinite combos, which are better than resetting. The double axe, if you go right, left, right, left, right, left infinitely, you will have faster swing times than if you just did 3 of the regular attack or just use the secondary attack. Same with the battle axe. The battle axe technically also has an infinite swing pattern, which is the right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. It is technically faster than the 2 overhead swings. Doesn't mean it's better to use, not necessarily for all situations, but it's just something to note that there's another infinite swing on the battle axe. Club has an infinite swing, but I don't even count club as a weapon because it's so bad. When looking at weapons to use, you have to also consider the cleave potential. It's very hard to swing transfer weapons that do not pokes, rather, that are do like overhead attacks that aren't pokes, because when you're overhead attacking, you will risk cleaving or hitting the ground when you try to swing to multiple targets. So that's also something to note when you're choosing your weapon. Again, there's always set weapon metas and whatnot, but like if you're a newer player, you can basically get away with whatever you want. But it's important to know that like certain weapons have like really bad cleave potential. So if you're playing team modes where you need to hit more than one thing, or you're fighting mobs and you need to hit more than one mob, again, it's just something to note. Pay attention to cleave potential of weapons. Dragging weapons. These are just weapons that have like longer, lingering hitboxes that are easier to drag around shields or parries. This is like the Morning Star. You can do it with all weapons, but it's very hard to do with a lot of one-hander weapons that aren't like the Morning Star. The Morning Star, you can swing your weapon away from the target, drag it to the target, and it will hit them behind whatever shield they are because of where the weapon is. Stuff like that. It's very important to know that. It's another form of axling, but that's just something that you learn way deep into the game. But just know that like if you're having trouble with shields, you'll try to swing your weapon outside of the shield and drag it behind the shield, drag it to the person after you swung. I don't know that will matter too much in the lower gear lobbies and for the newer players, but it's something to keep in mind if you're always struggling versus shield users. True damage weapons, when I say this, I just refer to weapons that get the most out of true. This basically discounts all two-handed weapons and slow swinging one-handed weapons. So don't sock a true, even if it's good for your class. In general, if you're planning on using any sort of two-handed weapon or any one-handed weapon that has long swings, like the Falchion is a big example. I want to say Crystal Sword counts in there too, for true magic and all that, even though it's technically a two-hander, it's in one hand. Anything like that is basically no good. So if you're using true, you need to be using fast attacking weapons that also don't have, that don't want to worry about sour spots. That's why the Arming Sword, as shown here, is a prime target for true damage for stacking true damage, because like you have a pretty bad chance to, or easy chance to get the orange zone, if not the red zone, for your sour spot damage. And true damage weapons are just like probably need to be nerfed, but they're not going to. So it's just important to notice that. Then there's like the whole ranged weapons. So like bows and all that. Just know that those weapons never suffer from sour spots or anything like that. They only suffer from limb, like shot location modifiers. Blocking, yeah, shields are really good. We already know that. It's a little bit jank for blocking in particular. If you're struggling with blocking, I don't do a lot of blocking because I'm playing Barb. My only time I ever have it is a round shield, and the round shield is not a great shield. Shields don't work in general. It's important to note when blocking, there's only like 3 things to note. When you're blocking a poking weapon, oftentimes they will poke through your shield, and it's just something you have to deal with. What's happening is they're hitting your shield and they're hitting your hand behind the shield, doing damage usually. So staying further away is usually better when you're blocking a poking weapon than trying to barrel stuff them. I know it kind of sucks. Blocking also has to deal with something else you should know is always try to overcorrect your block, because if so, you're blocking overhead attack and you don't look all crouch and look all the way up. A lot of times weapons will hit your head because the way the hitboxes work, rather than hitting your shield first. So just keep that in mind. Not a lot of people know this, but different weapons, and it's not mentioned in the wiki, have different clank reset times. What a clank means is you hit like some object or a wall. Two-hander weapons have higher clank than non-two-hander weapons. This is why fighting around stuff when you're playing Barb or two-handed Warlock or two-handed Fighter is really bad, because if you clank a wall, it is infinitely worse than missing a swing, because your reset time is way, way, way longer. This is why if you hit a wall when you're playing Barb, you're basically dead if you didn't already get the first hit in. So just keep that in mind. Hit slow is important. All weapons have hit slow. Ranged weapons should not, but they do. It is important to know what hit slow your weapon has so you can determine your spacing so that you get the optimal sweet spots for your weapon. This is why when you play Warmaul, you don't necessarily always want to be hitting somebody as close as you can, because you're going to be getting sour spots. You want to keep someone in your hit slow. The Warmaul and the Morningstar have the highest hit slow of minus 25%. Most two-handed weapons have 30%. Most two-handed weapons have 25%, and then most one-handers have like 17. But it's good to know that if you're trying to play something different, like a Rondo fighter or a fighter that has high hit slow weapons, you need to stick closer to your target rather than further away, and vice versa. If you're playing a two-handed weapon, you can stick a little further away to keep your sweet spot intact with your hit slow. And then equip times and holster times. All weapons have their own equip time. There used to be a hot swapping mechanic in the game, which was really a bug where people would have ignored this. It's important to note that some stuff still works like this. You can always, rather than unequipping your weapon, i.e. holstering it for the whole time, you can switch to a potion, which is minus 10 move speed, and then take out your hands, because that is faster than switching from weapon. I don't encourage this because I don't think it should be part of the game, but it's just something to know that like certain weapons have longer equip times. So when you're chasing targets on characters that are using two-handed weapons, especially when you don't have high equip speed, you have to pull out your weapon way earlier than you think when you're chasing. This applies to all classes, but a lot of the time it applies to like two-handed classes. This is why it's like really hard to fight rogues, even though technically you would think you should be able to kill a rogue quickly or some caster quickly once you get on them. The problem is by the time that you get on top of them and then you have to pull out your weapon, they usually, if they are running, will continue to run away and you won't be able to hit them before you can pull out your weapon and swing. Just something to keep in mind. All right, now we're just going to go for like economy stuff. This is just to help like newer players figure out what's valuable, what's not valuable. I'm not going to go over everything, but yeah, crafting mats are always valuable. This is stuff like ores, anything above like ruby, silver, and above. Certain mats like wolf pelts are always good because they're crafting mats. Stuff that is used to craft certain weapons or gear like mana flasks and spider silks. Then there's like big crafting mats, which are used to craft gold just like troll pelt and wolf pelt and spectral fabric. These things are like used to craft bags, so they'll always be valuable. Gear is always valuable, but like certain pieces of gear are never picked up. Nobody's picking up like Germundabu helmets and stuff like that. So when looking for gear to loot, always be picking up popular items, utility, yeah, keys and stuff like that, lockpicks, troll's blood, stuff like that. Always nice. Stats to look out for, always pick up true damage stuff if you can, especially if it's on anything that's like epic quality and above, especially if it's on desirable pieces. Just for quick selling. That's how you keep your economy going and all that stuff. Luck is placebo. Just so everyone knows, luck only increases your ability to find common crafting mats. That includes like wolf pelt and below. So if you're trying to get like questing stuff, luck is good. If you're not, do not run luck on anything. It actually makes finding other stuff worse for questing stuff. Quest mats like trolls pelt, wyvern hide, and all that stuff. And luck doesn't do anything for the real game either anyway, so just disregard luck basically entirely. It's placebo. If you're overpaying for luck here, you're just trolling yourself. General progression of the wipe. This wipe will be different because there's no trading originally, but this is what's going to happen. You in the first month, aside from this wipe coming up, it'll probably extend into like the first 2 weeks of the next month. The only people that are selling stuff that are worth any money are desperate players who need money. Basically, every single person is hoarding all the above crafting mats and all the important pieces of valuable gear. So don't sell anything if you can avoid it. Only sell things if you're desperate. Hoard all your gear, hoard all your valuable stuff. If you need to look up like what to hoard, there's a million guides on like what's valuable and whatnot. I'm just telling you, this is just kind of how the wipe progresses. Month 2 is like the first wave of crafting stuff and mega crafting mats. This is where you need to be like hoarding crafting mats from the first month to offload them in the second month. Whenever you go from a next month to the next month, you buy the stuff in the you offload the stuff from the previous month to buy stuff for the next month. So around month 2, keys will still be worth something, but they'll be cheaper than they will be at the end of the game or near the end of the wipe. So you go from the first month to hoarding your gear. You dump all your gear that you find for as many crafting mats as you can before all the crafts get unlocked. Then in the month 2, you dump all your crafting mats and you buy as many keys as you can for the mid to late wipe. And then at the end of near the mid to late wipe, after that phase is over, you sell all your keys and you buy gem and bisque gear because those things never go down in price. So yeah, if you're a PvPer, to loot the best, you need to judge when you're going to go up a gear level. And what I mean by that is like you want to try to find for your specific class in the early game what is the minimum viable gear that you can run to be successful in PvP. So like if you're playing rogue, you can get away with running cheap gear that has true damage if you play properly, because you can just simply kill people with the true damage alone when playing correctly. Classes like wizard or warlock need to spend more on gear on average in the lower lobbies to compete, because a lot of their power comes in the late game when everyone is geared and they can get all the stats they need. So just note for your class, sometimes you need to invest a little bit more early versus later. If you can, but you always want to be going with the minimum viable gear in the early game, to like stack up your bank essentially. PvP is different for everybody, but if you're like a caster class, you want to play on the open maps like ruins, and like ice map. You don't want to be playing Goblin Caves if you're trying to play. If you're like a sneaky class or like a rogue or classes that need to like play around doors, you want to be playing where there's lots of doors. So like crypts and Goblin Caves, not ice map stuff like that. If you want to be playing for any sort of ranged, you want to try to avoid crypts, obviously. So like if you're playing like a ranged based class in particular, you kind of want to stay to like Goblin Caves, ice map, places where there's more open line of sights, stuff like that. Inferno's not too bad for certain tiles, but yeah, it's just important for that. If you're playing solos, basically, I don't know anything about trios, so we're just going to do solos and duos. But if you're playing solos, you primarily want to play on Goblin Caves because it's the easiest map to learn and it's very easy to get the bosses done on there and then get out or get farm and get out, kill people and get out. Crypts is okay. Like the Crypts map is okay. The 3-layer map if you're confident enough to do that, but solos on Crypts is a little bit annoying for classes that can't deal with door gameplay. It's kind of annoying. It's gonna be hard for you to catch people. If you're playing duos, I think always you're playing basically Crypts. I don't think you're ever playing duos on any other map. Solos, you can kind of play any map based on your class, but duos, I don't think you're playing any map but Crypts because you need to be able to do the bosses if you're trying to farm. Same with trios, but like trios is a different beast. And yeah, best. So like, you never really want to be playing ice map for duos or Goblin Caves for duos, especially since Goblin Caves doesn't have a second layer. Though do what you want, you can have fun. Best comps. I don't really know all the best comps. All I know is you never want to be trying to accomplish two of the same things in one go. So like you never want to be having somebody that's like you never want to try to play two frontline classes. It can be done. It's just annoying. You never want to be playing two hardcore melee classes in the same stack. It can be done. It's just harder to play. You never want to be playing multiple sources of range damage where the melee is harder to fight. So like two rangers is good, but it's a little bit hard, etc., etc. I know you can't class stack anymore all the way, but I'm just saying in general, if you happen to solo queue and you get a duo partner that isn't like ideal for your comp, it's probably better to just reset. Stuff like that. And then for non-PvPers, like this basically go like if you're trying to avoid PvP, this basically goes for like anyone that's just trying to learn the game but not engage too much. The map will determine the play style that you play on the class that you play will determine what map you play on. So like if you're specifically AFK farming on Warlock, go play Ice Map. You get a million. No one's gonna really be there except for other Warlocks. You can basically farm all the mobs in peace, etc., etc. If you're playing something that's more like sneak heavy and you want to just farm stuff, Goblin Caves you get in and you get out. So like rogues, druids, stuff like that, because you're gonna go through the doors and stuff like that. People that are trying to just like AFK farm in particular, stuff that's really good to farm is like stuff that's easy. So like boss, if you can boss, do troll over and over and over and over. And if you're good at, if your play style and you're playing a class that's good at killing the boss, so like bard, rogue, not so much warlock anymore per se because of the troll changes. But if your class is not very good at bossing, but you want to farm, you want to be hitting things like wolves in the ice map, wolves in the ruins map, wolves in anywhere that they spawn, basically. You want to be hitting giant spiders in the Goblin Caves map for the silk, and anywhere that you can mine, although mining has been significantly nerfed and you can only get it in Inferno, basically, that matters. So just keep that in mind. Certain things like plants are valuable later on in the game. Picking up prop pots and all that stuff will always be valuable later in the game. Surge kits, same thing. Lockpicks and stuff like that. There are certain phases for newer players to know. In the first 2 months of the wipe, picking up pickaxes is very valuable, especially if they're blue quality, because people are trying to farm crafting mats with them. So if you happen to stumble upon a pickaxe, pick it up, put it in your equipment bar or whatever, utility bar. It's really good for quick boost of loot for you or money for you. And then surges and trolls bloods are way later in the game. But trap disarmament kits are very slept on. You can make a lot of money off those if you're a non-PvPer, if you hoard them in the early game and sell them when the quests come out, stuff like that. Anything that's a quest enabler, so if you happen to know what the quests are, sometimes they get leaked, sometimes they don't. Anything that's a quest enabler item will always go for money if it doesn't need to be found by you. So if you can save those as a non-PvPer, very valuable for you. And then we're just basically going to go over like some core concepts of the game and like how you play certain like levels of gear and whatnot and like progression of the game. So like if there's one important thing to take away from this video, it is the concept of space. So like space refers to like in the middle of an engagement, what your class is able to accomplish and do in relation to the other class and how much space you're able to hold. Space is basically just another word for pressure really, but it's just denying places from people holding high grounds, you know, preventing people from playing their class the way they want to be playing it. So there's basically three concepts. You're either a space taker, you're a space holder, or you're a space punisher. I'll bring up on screen now a list of all of them, but like if you're a barbarian, my class in particular, you do not take space and you do not hold space. You only can punish space. What do I mean by that? When you're playing, anything that has ranged damage or forces players to take action, you can take space, meaning you can force players to do things. If you are a wizard and you're standing on a tile and a team is pushing you, if you threaten fireball or you start throwing fireballs, you are holding space. You can prevent people from coming towards you because you have ranged abilities that prevent people from running towards you. If you are ranged combat again, for the most part, you can take space because you can, once someone has stopped moving or is hiding, you can push up and take space from people, denying them areas by using your abilities. This is why when you're playing Barb, once your team gets pushed, you can't really do anything about people getting pushed. You can't force people to like stop throwing ranged damage at you. You can only be punishing people that take too much space. So if someone overextends, you can punish on Barb, but you can never punish people by chasing them because they can always just almost always infinitely run away or hold you back with range damage. That's why holding space is really hard on Barb. If your team forces the enemy team off like a high ground or like a certain point of the map that's valuable to hold, you can't really stop people from coming up. You can't really stop people from shooting range projectiles at you. You don't really have the options to like threaten any damage, so you can't hold space. That's the most important concept to understand is what your character does in terms of taking space, what your character does in terms of holding space, and if your character can punish space. Playstyles versus the mode you play. This is just like whether or not you're playing different gear brackets. And it also kind of comes down to the mode you're playing as well, like if you're playing duos, trios, and whatnot, but we'll get to that in the next slide. But 0 to 124, which is like the lowest of the low gear score brackets, the main thing that's important is your personal space on the tile or map that you're playing on and baiting enemy skills. Nothing else matters. What's on the map doesn't matter. If you're getting third party, doesn't really matter. All that matters is like where you're standing and what skills the enemy is dumped and what skills you have in reserve, giving yourself options. Okay. So when you're when you're playing at a newer player or you're playing at low gear score, you standing near a door to have an escape is more important than you running up to someone and hitting them and potentially killing them. You need to always be judging where you are in comparison to your opponent and where you can go in comparison to your opponent, your personal space, where the mobs are, stuff like that, and what skills they've dumped. Most of the time in the low gear lobbies, because gear doesn't really matter, and there's usually only one or two players. Even when you're playing trios, it's like one team or whatever. All that matters is where you guys are on the specific tile for fighting, and like, did the other guy use his skills? Did he use his rage? Did he use his divine protection? Okay, it's on cooldown. Now I can go in and I can fight. 0 to 225, when real gear starts mattering, really what's important is When you're fighting, you're always looking to burst down because the gear isn't so extravagant. You're always looking to burst down the character on the enemy team that's enabling the comp or that enables the other player. So like, for instance, if you're playing duos and you see a barb and a cleric, your only goal to think about while you're fighting isn't even necessarily your positioning, although obviously that matters. It's how you're going to kill the cleric so that he can't heal the barb and then you can win the fight. If you're playing like wizard fighter, how are you going to kill the wizard so that he stops dumping damage on you so the fighter can approach? How are you going to kill the enabler so that you can play the game? You have to burst the enabler and then you have to avoid third parties. That's like the most important thing in 225, 224 is because the gear, people are more apt to commit to fights because the gear isn't so expensive and the fights don't last terribly long because the gear isn't so expensive. So the third parties are usually really quick and happen quicker in the lower gear score, but not like the high gear score, not like 124, but like 225, right? They changed it to 0 to 225 now, so you will be finding people with lower gear, but that's what's the most important, is bursting the person that enables the comp. That used to be the way that you played trios a long, long time ago, but less so about that now. And then 225 is all about where you are on the map and your personal positioning, how it relates to the space you're taking. So what do I mean by that? I just mean, are you on the correct tile to be fighting for your team comp? Are you near a tile that will invoke third parties? Are you near or playing on a tile that's better for the other team's comp? Are you on the right tile in terms of like, once you're done here, or if someone dies, are you near a res shrine that you can res your teammates if you don't have a cleric on your team that has res? That is way more important than the individual fighting itself, like the individual swinging of the weapons. Personal positioning and how it relates to space. Are you playing barb? Are you standing in a way that protects your team so your team can do damage? Are you a rogue? Or do you need to be away from your team, lingering on the side? These are things that are more important in 225, and you should think about that in terms of like how your character denies, punishes, or takes space or holds space with range damage. Like, are you a ranger? Do you need to be playing further up? A big mistake, you see it in arenas all the time. I'm pretty high up in the arenas. You see it in arenas all the time where someone will make space for your team, but your backline is too afraid to push forward. And then you don't get to claim the space that you made, and nothing really happens as a result of the damage that the person did with their ability or attack or whatever. Something else to note about that is like, if you ever are in a position where you should heal or you can heal, you should always be healing. There's a lot of times where like a dynamic of a team fight will play out like this, okay? Your cleric gets dinked. He loses like 20% of his health. It's not a big deal in the current moment. Your team's dealing damage. Your ranger hits a nasty headshot. The barb and the ranger push up. The cleric pushes up. But now you can't press any other advantage that you get while you're pushing up because your cleric didn't heal when you were sitting back. And now he has to heal, which is lost time. Worse lost time than if you would have just healed when you were back, if that makes sense. You want to be healing like anytime that you can do it when there's like a downtime or a lull before you anyone ends up doing damage. Like if you need to take a bandage in the middle of a fight, it's one thing. But if you need to take a bandage in the middle of a fight after your ranger just landed a headshot, well, now you've lost all the space that your ranger would have gained you by landing said headshot because you had to take a bandage at an inopportune time. That's something I noticed a lot in low player lobbies and specifically in like arena is like you'll notice the bad arena players won't heal at opportune times, and then what will end up happening is someone will do something that enables space for your team to take an advantage on the map, and then someone has to heal, and it's like, well, we can't just all that stuff that I just did that gave me all that space, it's completely washed away because I have to heal now. I can't move up. I can't take the corner. I can't get the high ground. I can't do that because I'll risk dying. So something very important to take into account. And then like tanking damage versus dealing damage. This is something else that like is kind of hard to understand, but will make sense hopefully by the time I'm done. So like playing any sort of tank build on any sort of damage class is basically griefing. And what do I mean by this? So like if you're playing Ranger and you're playing a tank build and you're not like one of the best Rangers in the game, you're just griefing. It doesn't matter if you see like Cody playing some tank Ranger, it's just griefing, because the classes that are already going to kill you are already going to kill you no matter how tanky you are. There's no amount of tankiness that you can get where a rogue doesn't just like kind of kill you if he catches you out of like invis, or a druid jumps on you in Panther. There's no amount of like tankiness that you can achieve that will stop you from dying and allow you to out DPS the person that's killing you. So there's no reason for you to be overbuilding your tankiness on DPS classes, because it doesn't really do anything. All that matters for tankiness, especially if you're playing like a frontliner class, is how much you need to be tanky enough and know how much damage you can take before you actually get to engage in a fight. So when you're playing Barb and you're chasing a Ranger, let's say you're playing solo and you're chasing a Ranger, how much damage can you take before you can actually take the fight is very important to know, because if you take one arrow, okay, sure, you can still fight in melee if you get the opportunity to fight in melee. But if you take 2 or 3, now it's like, okay, can I win the fight if I get in melee anyway? Usually the answer is no. So that's something very, like, a lot of newer players don't really understand, is like, it's okay to take damage. You don't always have to heal, but you have to know how much damage you can take relative to how much effective HP you need when you actually get to engage. A lot of the ranged classes can take a lot of damage, relatively speaking, before they actually need to heal per se, especially in like a 1v1, because they're always able to put pressure on you and deal damage to you as you approach, as like a melee class or a class that has shorter range, like a Warlock, for instance. But if you're playing something like Warlock, you need to have more HP as you approach rather than like a Wizard, because you don't have as much range. So you need to know how much damage you can actually take before you get into real combat. And then this is like a big broader topic, but like range damage, or any sort of ranged, isn't really just a damage tool. When you shoot a bow, you're not just shooting a bow that does damage. You're shooting a tool. You're using a tool that provides space. It allows you to put pressure on. So like when you have a fireball charged, your fireball isn't just, oh my God, I'm going to do big fireball damage to somebody. It's the threat of the fireball is something. The ability to hit someone around the corner is something. Sometimes it's often better, especially if you're playing like Ranger, for instance, and you have, let's say, a windlass. Not that I think that windlass should be at the game. To not fire your weapon is sometimes better than actually firing your weapon while walking like forward on somebody or taking space on somebody, because the threat is oftentimes more important than the actual damage that you would do, especially if you're not able to get a kill. It's often better to hold a spell or to hold some sort of ranged damage than it is to do the range damage if the enemy player is about to get away anyway, because if you hold it, they will often make more mistakes and you can force them into more disadvantageous like locations by just holding the spell or holding the thing. It's the same thing for a Barb. If you're chasing somebody that's running away from you, you have a friend with Achilles on. If you're not going to be able to hit the Achilles, close the gap, take out your weapon, and swing before they get away, it's often better to just walk at them with the Franny and Achilles enabled than it is to throw the Fran with the Achilles enabled, if that makes sense. It's basically like another option that the tool is providing you. I know I talked about it before, but healing on Space Makers is like the most important thing in the game. You need to be healing at opportune times. Like I said before, if you're a Space Maker like a Sork and you make space, but you didn't heal properly, all the space that you made does not matter because it just gets evaporated because you had to heal before you could close out the fight. So just keep what I said before in mind. Healing on Space Makers is probably the most important thing. You see in Arena all the time, some Ranger will be doing 1 million damage, he doesn't heal, and then when he gets the advantage because of the damage he was doing, now he has to succeed the advantage because he has to heal, and he can't like take the space that he would have been able to take based on the damage that he did. And then range damage and peeling. A lot of the time, range damage dealers, unless you're like gonna end up killing the person that you're doing range damage to, it's often, especially on Ranger, because range damage from Ranger slows so much, it's often better to shoot somebody that's going on your teammate in a team game or anything like that, than it is to deal damage to someone else that's a squishy that's also dealing damage. So if there's a wizard casting spells and he's not directly hitting your teammates, or he's not creating pressure on your teammates, but there's a fighter that's approaching your other squishy character like a bard or something like that, it's often better to use your ranged damage to slow and or make the other person that's approaching mess up their approach or stop their approach than it is to deal damage on another squishy that's across the room, tile, map, whatever. So you'll notice this on a lot of Ranger players that are really good. They stop shooting squishy targets that they could potentially kill because it's more important that your teammate doesn't die or get engaged on by the class that can only engage in melee or that isn't trying to engage in melee. So just keep that in mind. When you're doing range damage, it's often better to shoot targets that are like going for your teammates than it is for you to secure a kill on someone else that's playing ranged that isn't imposing enough threat on your team for it to matter. And then this is like general mode strategies. Again, I'm not the best trio player. I can play arena trios fine, but I don't play a lot of trios. So what I say on trios doesn't necessarily hold as much weight as what I say for solos and duos, because that's what I mainly play. In solos, you almost never want to try to take fights that you can't end quickly in high traffic areas. This is like not so much prevalent anymore because the tiles are randomized, but like specific rooms draw people's attention. Fog of War also prevents this, but like any room that's easy to traverse or easy to get into, you should try to avoid fighting in those rooms if you're playing solo and you're new, because the likelihood of somebody showing up in those rooms is higher than the likelihood of someone showing up in like one of the other tiles. This relates to just in general, fighting the middle floor tiles is like, you want to try to if you're going to try to start a fight there, you need to end it quickly, or you need to be able to get away. Stuff like that. Always having a way out in solos is also extremely important. Always be planning your way out when you're getting into a fight. You see a druid, he's across the way. Okay, he doesn't have to worry because he can rat jump through windows on Goblin Caves, let's say. But like you as like a ranger need to always have, okay, if I get into this fight and it goes south, am I going to get out on this door? Am I going to go down this elevator? Am I going to go over here? Where am I going to go if the fight goes bad? If the fight is winning, if I'm winning the fight, where am I going to position myself so I don't get third partied? If the fight's taking a little bit longer, how am I going to use the map to my advantage? Always looking for ways to be like around, stuff like that. For solos, always be wary of pushing doorways because of rogues and stuff like that. Obviously, rogue is better in the lower populated game modes like solo and duo, but like I said, be wary of pushing doors for landmines, stuff like that. Statics and portals, also be aware of pushing or using statics and portals because people will camp them, be looking for ways to cheese you on them, so just be careful. Don't always assume that you're going to run to a static or like get on a static like a rope now that most of the statics are removed, and be getting out for free because people tend to camp them. For duos, the most important thing is kind of to try not to overcommit to a solo fight if your teammate is being pushed. So let's say you're playing Barbarian, your teammate is Wizard, okay? And you're fighting a fighter and a Ranger. Let's say the Ranger's like doing a little bit of damage, whatever, the fighter is like doing his thing, and the fighter starts to commit on your Wizard. And you've already used your Achilles Fran on the Ranger, and you are about to kill him, and you've kind of forcing him away. It is not advisable for you to ever sacrifice your teammate, especially when there's no restaurants near, which is something to talk about after, than it is for you to turn and kill the person with your teammate, even if your teammate would be, even if you would be able to get the trade on the Ranger. It's always almost better to collapse on the target, pushing your duo partner, kill him with your duo partner, keeping your duo partner alive, than it would be for you to finish a kill that you were going for solo. This works for any of the other classes. Obviously, Ranger is a little bit of a different situation because the Ranger can always just turn and start shooting. But once you forced the guy to run away, it's always better to turn and help your duo than it is to run, especially for lower players, because a lot of the lower time played players won't know to turn around and help their teammate as quick. So something very important to know. Always try to maximize your duo's playstyle. So like if you're playing Barb Ranger, don't commit early on Barb. Don't try to force a melee fight on Barb early. Let your Ranger shoot and cook and do his damage. Same thing if he's playing Wizard or some other caster. Always try to maximize your duo's playstyle. So like if you're playing Barb Ranger, don't commit early on Barb. Don't try to force a melee fight on Barb early. Let your Ranger shoot and cook and do his damage. Same thing if he's playing Wizard or some other caster. If your duo is a warlock, you got to play way slower. Just know what your duo is trying to do in the game, and try to maximize his gameplay. Obviously, melee is like the main thing to worry about here. Is like, because you're a melee player, you often will feel like, especially on fighter barb, even though fighter has crossbow, but like, or bows, you'll often feel like, or even rogue to an extent, you'll often feel like you're not doing anything. But oftentimes, not doing anything and just preventing your teammate from dying or preventing people from going on your teammate is way more valuable than you actually securing a kill on someone that you could have secured a kill on. Which brings you to the last point: attempt not to trade. Especially to attempt not to trade, but try not to trade in general, but especially don't trade if you haven't come across a res shrine or aren't near a res shrine, because you will almost always, before you get the res off, have your gear stolen from you that you got from someone else in the dungeon, and or get third party and get killed. And then trios, like, again, I'm not the best trios player, but the main concept of trios, especially for lower tier players, is try to win every single engagement you can with as little investment as possible. So, like, you're playing trios, you're a barb, a cleric, and a wizard, okay? You want to try to win your team fight with as little wizard spells and cleric spells as dumped as possible. So, like, if there's an opportunity for you to not throw a fireball because it's not going to immediately win you the fight, it's better to hold and not waste your spells or your resources, anything, frannies, whatever, prop pots, if you're not going to immediately get a secure kill. I see a lot of fights happening all the time where someone is like throwing frannies that aren't doing anything or that won't net you anything, popping prots early or wasting prots, heals, meds, stuff like that, throwing fireballs, whatever the case may be, without actually getting anything out of it. You want to try to win every single fight with as low resources spent as possible to avoid getting third party and stuff like that. Avoid pushing doors in trios, especially in trios. When you don't see the enemy away from the door, oftentimes you're going to get doors closed on you. You're going to get trapped from your teammate, and they won't be able to save you or do anything or create pressure or space so that you can retreat. So try to avoid pushing doors. Even when you have another team on the run, it's oftentimes not advisable to push through a door quickly, because if you do and you don't end up killing anybody, or they get to turn on you 3v1 for a short period of time, it's often enough time for them to kill you without them having to lose anything or for you to be able to secure a kill. Something to be thinking about in relation to that is, like, every time you're fighting in trios, it happens in duos a little bit, but mainly in trios, because duos you can kind of recover pretty quickly, but in trios especially, most of the time you just need to have the thought in the back of your head: if I fight here in this tile against this team, am I going to get griefed? Meaning, like, even if I win, what happens if another team shows up and I have nowhere to run? Like, you're fighting in a corner, one of the corner tiles, something like that, or on a side tile where there's only up or down to really leave if a team approaches you. It's always good to be thinking about, like, okay, am I going to get griefed if I fight this team? Like, even if I win against this team here, does it even matter? Because I can't get out. I can't get to a portal. I don't get the thing I came from. My teammates down. I can't res my teammates. A lot of the time it's just a simple, like, am I going to get griefed if I fight here? If the answer is yes, don't fight there. Maneuver around the map and wait for a better fight. That's another thing too, which is the next thing. Is like, is it worth to fight here or at all? That's the same sort of line of thinking, but like sometimes it's not even worth to fight people if you don't think you're going to get anything out of it. You don't think you're going to get any gear. You're not going to be able to get out. You're not going to be able to do the boss that you wanted to do. Especially if teams aren't trying to actively grief your boss. If you're trying to boss stuff like that, a lot of the times it's, should I even fight at all? Is it even worth it for me to even risk fighting at all for no reason? If I win, like, am I going to be able to, like, do all that? Especially for, like, res tables, recovery times, like campfires, clarities, all that stuff. Like, if I fight here, am I just griefing for no reason? The next big thing to think about in trios is, like, are you taking a fight or are you starting a fight? And what I mean by that is, a lot of the times, the people that start fights don't actually get to win or play the game more often than if you just have to take a fight. The difference between that is, like, starting a fight is like you're approaching people, you're charging at people, you're casting your spells at people, versus, like, taking a fight is if something happens organically and people end up coming towards you and you have to fight. That's different than, like, starting a fight. So, like, you never really want to start a fight because you're always usually at a disadvantage if you've dumped spells and you get nothing out of it. But when you're taking a fight, which is different, something has already happened to you guys, and now you have to respond. Taking fights is almost always better than starting fights unless you get a huge pick or an advantage really early that allows you to do something, because your out resources of the enemy team isn't out. They have more options than you do. The main thing is thinking about options. Like, what options do you have? If you're starting a fight, you're usually pushing into somebody, which means they already have the advantage of like being on a tile that they're either want to be on, or that is they've already kind of set themselves up. So just keep that in mind when you're starting versus taking fights when you're playing trios, especially at lower levels. Like, you don't want to like charge into somebody that's already kind of set up, or you don't want to like charge into a place where you had to expend a bunch of resources to even be able to fight. Like, you had to sprint on your fighter to get in range. You had to like cast a bunch of spells for you to get in range. Whereas the other team is just waiting for you to get in range, and then they have all their abilities and actives and spells ready to use, if that makes sense. And then this brings me to the last point of trios, which is a big thing. I talked about it before, but like, there's a lot of times where someone on your team makes space. They do some sort of damage. You knock someone in a position. You catch someone on a door, and your back line doesn't move up in the appropriate way to secure the space. This happens a lot. Like, the backline players need to be moving up and taking that space, like using the space that was granted to you guys by like moving forward. A lot of the times, like, you'll get like a nasty headshot on somebody, and your frontliner will go in, or someone that's the that enabled the space will be going in to secure a kill or to secure a part of the map or whatever, and the backline is too afraid to move up properly, and then the other guy dies, or he gets out of position now that you guys have to retreat. It's always important for backliners to not lag behind. So just keep that in mind when you're playing trios. You do not want to be lagging behind as a backliner, because a lot of the times, like, backliners have important abilities that can either help or deny space and whatnot, like clerics with earthquake and stuff like that. So you don't want to ever be standing too far back, especially like if you don't need to be actively using a spell on your teammates. Like, a lot of times moving forward and creating the pressure of you moving forward is more important than you like hiding in the back and waiting for your teammate to be in a situation where he needs your help from like behind you, from being behind them. So anyway, that's basically it. I hope that helps most players. If there's anything you need like clarification on when I'm live, you can come ask me. You can ask in the comments. You can join my Discord. If you go to my live streams and type !Discord, you can do that if you need any clarification or anything like that. But hopefully that gives you kind of like a better understanding of like how your character is played, what you're supposed to be doing based on what modes you want to play, like how to basically manage your economy and all that, what to look for, stuff like that. If anything doesn't make sense, just let me know. If there's things that you need clarification on, like I said, just let me know. Comments, Discord, when I'm live and stuff like that, and I'll try to further explain it. This is my like first time making like a super big guide video, so like some things might not make sense, or I might have explained it in a weird way, and I might be able to explain it differently when I'm like live or whatnot. So if you need help, just ask. Anyway, thanks for sticking around for the whole long hour. If you got any value, or you're trying to, help a brother out, share the video with all your friends that need it, and sub. Peace.